My name is Amy, and I believe congratulations are in order. Congratulations, Allie Beth Stuckey. You have just won, out of every individual in the entire world, you have just won something priceless, a once in a lifetime gift of getting your birth chart read by me. I can't wait to read your birth chart, girl. Let's just hop into it. On February 18th, 1992, in Dallas, Texas, right after a full moon and during a very unique conjunction of Mars and Venus at 0 degrees Aquarius, Allie Beth Stuckey was born. I couldn't find Allie's birth time anywhere, but I have made a guess, and I'm going to be reading her birth chart based off of this guess. Though the more I have spent time with this chart and this rising sign that I chose, the more confident I am that it makes sense. I would love to know how right or how wrong I am and read her actual official birth chart. But this guess I'm pretty confident in. I'm going to be reading it like I know that this is her birth time. So on February 18th in 1992 at midnight 01, the moon was, I think, maybe like 28 degrees Leo. It was very, very late Leo, right after the full moon. The time that I chose for her birth chart, 12:25 p.m., the moon is at 5 degrees Virgo. So still a full moon, separating full moon, but yeah, I think that Allie Beth Stuckey has a day chart. I think that the sun is the stronger luminary based off of a couple factors, but definitely, mostly, I was influenced by the fact that her Mercury, her natal Mercury, is conjunct her sun. Her career and her life's path seems to be her speaking her mind. Another reason why I chose Gemini rising was to make that Pisces Mercury at 4 degrees up there conjunct her sun, her chart ruler, as well as put it near the midheaven and in the 10th house. It really does reflect her career. The first thing that I noticed when I pulled up her chart was definitely the conjunction of Mars and Venus at 0 degrees in Aquarius. That is very striking. And the second thing I noticed was the full moon, with both luminaries conjunct a different planet. The sun conjunct Mercury, the moon conjunct Jupiter. I think that is so stark, very interesting to see. So Allie is an Aquarius sun at anaretic degree 29. Her sun sits on the last day of Aquarius. It's interesting because Aquarius is a sign that's for the people. It's opposite the king, it's opposite royalty. It's the people, the working class, the community. In Allie's case, her people are American Christian fundamentalists. This is the group that she identifies with. This is the group that she was raised in. I believe she was raised Southern Baptist. This is the group that she raises a respectful ruckus for. That's a quote that I saw on her website. I don't know if maybe that's like the tagline for her podcast, but I thought that was very interesting. Her Saturn at 11 degrees does trine this Gemini rising at 14 degrees. That's the degree where my guess for her rising landed. Saturn trine ascendant is giving Saturn a direct line to her identity and how she presents herself in the world and in her career, because the chart ruler is up there in the 10th house. Allie Beth is somebody who is a little bit intense with her energy, but it's like there's a pot simmering under her but she's actively subduing it. It feels a lot like a lid on a boiling pot to me. She speaks with an intensity, but she is often playing the act of being calm and confident and a convicted, righteous person. And communication is probably the main tactic she uses to put forth this act. Her Saturn is a confident Saturn. It's in Aquarius, it's in its domicile. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It rules 6 planets and her north node. It rules her sun. Even though I do believe that Allie is a day chart, which would make Saturn the weaker malefic in her chart, I think that could be slightly beneficial, as in Saturn, authority figures, her father possibly, might go a little bit easy on her. They might be less oppressive and restrictive and consequential than if she were a night chart. Although, to me, it kind of seems like Saturn does not have consequences to give to Allie because she is already restricting herself. Saturn trine rising. Like, she's doing the work to restrict herself, to make sure she's in line, to make sure that she is within the rules that her authority has pressured her to work under, and she's doing a good enough job that she's not getting consequences. This chart, this Saturn, kind of indicates to me that possibly she, as a young person, she probably only had to make a mistake once to learn the life lesson to not do that again, or possibly even watching people in her community make mistakes, or since this is in the 9th house, maybe watching people that are in her community, Aquarius, but outside of her cultures, like maybe seeing people that were different from her make mistakes taught her to stay in line. That belief system, 9th house of beliefs, that belief system really informs her self-presentation and the way she sees herself and the way that she puts herself out into the world and into the public. I really like with this imaginary Gemini rising that it puts the sun up in technically the 9th house, but next to the midheaven, conjoined with Mercury in the 10th house, and puts Moon Jupiter in the 4th house. I really like that juxtaposition of like 9th house, 10th house, 4th house. Putting her luminary up there where she's public, but still in the 9th house of beliefs is really stark to me because her entire public persona is based off of her Christian faith and speaking her convictions, whether they are spiritual, religious, political, what have you. Her moon and Jupiter, which does rule her chart ruler, Mercury, it's actually Mercury and Jupiter are mutually receptive to each other. Putting this moon and Jupiter in the 4th house, because Jupiter and Mercury, her chart ruler, are mutually receptive to each other, her parents, her home life, and her childhood definitely inform her beliefs, her communication style, what she's communicating. Also, the fact that her Mercury is at 4 degrees does indicate to me that she speaks from a deep place in her. She's speaking from this 4th house and bringing these deeply felt convictions out into the public where she shines her light. Allie's Virgo moon trines her north node up in Capricorn. This seems to me like it could indicate her mother is very supportive of her work and of her growth as a person as she has grown into an adult, or that in that kind of like North Node obsessed way, she really works hard and feels a deep conviction to work hard for her mother's approval, her mother's pride in her. Since it's a trine, and since Jupiter is co-present with the moon down there, also trining the North Node, I would say that she's definitely successful. There's no indication of tension in that area. I actually watched a podcast of hers where her mother was the guest, and that's what it seemed like. They seemed like they had a pretty good relationship as a parent and a child. I do think though that because both signs involved are, it's Virgo and Capricorn, it's going from the 4th house to the 8th house. I think that she probably, she, Allie puts a lot of work into this relationship with her mother, and at this point it's a well-oiled machine that she's keeping up with. North Node is an indicator of that. Like, if they stop chasing their North Node, they will eventually, fall into the pattern of their South Node, of what is subconscious. Speaking of her parents, speaking of her home life, I couldn't help but notice that Chiron in Leo at 4 degrees in her 3rd house, that does indicate to me that there's some kind of tension involving maybe her siblings, maybe her hometown, her neighborhood. There's pain there surrounding her home specifically because this is at 4 degrees. I suspect that there might be pain coming from possibly her being the golden child, which is very Leo. Maybe she either wants to be the golden child, believes that she deserves to be the golden child, and never really felt like she got that accolade, or her being the golden child put a strain on her relationship to her siblings. I know she has 2 brothers. I believe she's the youngest of 3, and she has 2 older brothers. This Chiron also is opposite her Mars-Venus conjunction. Lilith is at 3 degrees, right conjunct in there too, and that's also opposite Chiron. There's tension between the pain of her hometown, her neighborhood, her relationship with her siblings, and the more controversial, disliked parts of her. Possibly, since it's an opposition, that indicates there's restriction there. That indicates that there are roadblocks when these 2 placements are interacting with each other. It's impossible to face away from. This pain is impossible to face away from when she's approaching connection with people, when she's fighting for what she feels is righteous, and when she's being controversial. Her pain creates tension in those situations always. That damn Mars-Venus conjunction, it's really the elephant in her birth chart. Since I believe she's a day chart, Mars is more powerful than Venus in that conjunction, so Mars is kind of like ruling the show. This conjunction is where it's the location in her birth chart of where she connects with people. It's Venus. I think that it's very, very interesting that it's at the beginning of the 9th house. It's basically like the gatekeeper of the 9th house. That makes me think that maybe she's someone who is like shaking people's hands very firmly at church. That definitely she's a cutting type of person. She probably really values boundaries and relationships, being that this conjunction is in a Saturn ruled sign. She's meeting people on the battleground. She meets you on the battleground, her enemies and her comrades. Because it's at 0 degrees, it's very much like once you get to the battlefield, then she'll know immediately whether you are an enemy or whether you are a comrade based on where you are on the battlefield. And her battlefield exists in the 9th house of belief, of religion, of higher education, of travel, experiencing other cultures, basically the culture war. Like, she is on the front lines of the culture war, and ain't that just the way? This placement indicates to me that she is not very well liked universally. Definitely not well liked by people who are in different social cultures than her, in different communities than her, for sure. But also, it might indicate to me that she might be disliked by certain people within her own community, especially because Lilith is just 2 degrees away from this conjunction at 3 degrees in Aquarius. She connects with people through disagreement. A very interesting example of this Venus conjunct Mars conjunct Lilith placement and aspect was this video she did for Jubilee. It was Allie Beth Stuckey versus 20 progressive Christians. That's so crazy. Like, leave it to a Mars conjunct Venus in Aquarius to be in a 1v20 debate situation. The people who do have a close relationship with Allie probably like that they feel protected by her and protected by being a part of her in-group. But it's kind of like, if you take a step outside the yellow brick road, Allie can't protect you anymore. And now you are on the other lines. Sorry, you're an enemy now, type of thing. It's one or the other. It's very black and white. Allie draws people in, Venus, sometimes with an argument. She's drawn in, for example, in that Jubilee video, the entire reason why she is meeting people that believe differently than her, which is very 9th house, it's based on a disagreement. She is bringing up a debate topic that she knows these 20 people will disagree with, and they are meeting and then immediately arguing. Fucking wild. Aquarius over the 9th house is very, very much like, oh, her community, Aquarius, is at church. Her community is involved with religious beliefs, which is very true. The base of her entire platform and her entire career, midheaven, conjunct sun, she has made it her career, and it seems like her life's purpose or her life's mission to speak to the people in her in-group about their faith, acting as sort of like a guide. Her audience is supposed to be the people in her in-group. Like, her podcast is called Relatable. Her book that she wrote is Toxic Empathy: How the Left Exploits Christian Compassion, which I think is pretty interesting because typically the 9th house represents places that are different from your hometown, you know? It's opposite the 3rd house, hometown, neighborhood, high school, it's university, it's traveling to other countries, it's different cultures. Allie, who is infamously a xenophobic, racist, Christian nationalist, American white woman, like, you can see how there's restriction in those areas of her life. She is hostile in those areas of her life. Two malefics in the ninth house can create a person who wants to, restrict and oppress people other than her, who have different culture than her. She does this on the basis of her religion, which is also a ninth house theme. Saturn over the ninth house. I recently heard this in Shayna Emily's Saturn in the ninth house video. She said that while the ninth house is open-mindedness, that Saturn in the ninth house can create closed-mindedness. It's restricting this person's ability to open their mind and expand. Another aspect that is restricting expansion to me would be, again, Allie Beth's 11-degree Aquarius Saturn is in conjunct exactly her 11-degree Virgo Jupiter. In conjunctions to me, I see them as these planets are in each other's blind spot. They exist in different worlds, almost like they exist in different realities to one another. So they really don't see eye to eye. They don't really understand each other. They're definitely not working closely with each other. Where Allie is expanding in her world, down in the fourth house, connected to her moon, it's private. That's in the most secret house. Her Saturn is especially influenced to not expand, not learn. Her Saturn is like an old dog who's not gonna learn any new tricks. Fuck you. Allie's behavior shows that she is not willing to expand her worldview, and she is not willing to be educated about other cultures, about other religions. She's not willing to open her mind. This behavior could be a signature of her ninth house placements, especially her Saturn, especially her Mars conjunct Venus. Allie's natal Pluto is at 22 degrees Scorpio in her sixth house. A sixth house Pluto is a hard worker. There's power in this person's labor, but it can also feel like, okay, there's always one more fucking thing to do. There's always one more chore to be done. There's a power play in the daily life of a person who has Pluto in the sixth house. Allie's Pluto does make a few significant aspects to other places in her chart. This Pluto is square her sun and her midheaven, which is, I'm gonna assume, is probably not a very good feeling aspect to have in your birth chart. It indicates that there's conflict and pressure and frustration when this sun expresses its life force. Since Pluto is also squaring her midheaven, that's just 4 degrees away from her sun. There's a power play that creates conflict in her work life when she adds to the archive of her reputation, which could make sense. She is a very polarizing figure. That could also indicate polarity regarding literally who she is, especially who she is in her public life and who she will be remembered to be. I do want to say, though, regarding Pluto square Sun, nobody is doomed to the less appealing astrology in their birth chart. Everybody has choices that they can make. Human brains are extremely elastic and can learn and learn and learn and learn and learn. And you can always make the choice to become better. I also believe that with any square to a luminary in a native's birth chart, any square to especially the sun in a person's birth chart, means that they are being given a choice of how they want to deal with a tense situation. That presents as a choice or an opportunity in how this person wants to live their life and what path they want to take down the road of their life, down the journey of their life. It's not an easy decision, but it depends on what planet is aspecting the sun. Because in this situation it's Pluto, this has to do with power. Allie had a choice. She still does have a choice to work for personal power to gain some kind of reputation for herself in her life's mission, and she chose to be a bigot. Allie chose to parrot harmful propaganda, harmful rhetoric based off of her religious beliefs. She chooses every day to show up in the world as a harmful person who supports powerful systems of oppression and that harms real people. That's going to be her legacy, and that's going to be her reputation, and that power play is going to be what she is remembered for long after she has lived all her years on Earth. An interesting note as well, this is the only planetary square in Allie's birth chart at all. Yeah, she does have oppositions. She has that big full moon opposition, but this is the only aspect that is causing a lot of conflict in Allie's birth chart at all. Besides squaring her sun in midheaven, Allie's Pluto also makes a sextile to her Uranus and Neptune up in the 8th house. Her Uranus is at 16 degrees, her Neptune's at 17 degrees in Capricorn. Sextile is an aspect of connection, of agreement, of allyship. Ally! So Pluto is supportive of Neptune and Uranus. Neptune and Uranus are supported by the work that Pluto does in the 6th house. This shows me she's always, like I said before, a 6th house Pluto is always working. A 6th house Scorpio Pluto is always working on internal transformation. Allie's relationship to how she works for transformations into an even more powerful person, a function of Allie's daily life, a portion of Allie's daily work and chores goes toward internal transformation. This internal transformation and work is in a relationship to, it's feeding her spiritual life. And because Neptune, her like spirituality, the veil that she puts over the world, the filter that she sees the world through, because this Neptune is conjunct Uranus, I would assume that this means that the harvest that came from her deep, sowing of the earth in the area of her 6th house, that shows up kind of in maybe spontaneous ways. The 8th house is also a place of death, rebirth, spiritual debt, and repayal of spiritual debt. Her north node is in here, in the 8th house, in Capricorn. So Allie definitely is constantly working towards a spiritual death and rebirth cycle where she is, ultimately selfless, Neptune, and renewed. But Pluto in the sixth house, like, there's always transformation work to do. She's not off the hook. And there's still conflict with how she's going down the path of her life and how she is seen by the public, how her reputation is unfolding in the storybook of her life. Pluto square her sun in midheaven also just kind of dials up the intensity. Sometimes it probably dials up this intensity to such an uncomfortable degree that her audience, the public, the people who can see her, get a distaste for it because it's too intense. It's too bitter, it's too salty, it's too whatever. Although she performs this calm, confident, self-righteous, not too emotional Christian woman, there is detectable ire beneath her words and beneath that Saturnian act that's influencing how she's coming off. She is an outspoken woman speaking very controversial, intense, black and white opinions and spouting propaganda that is in support of the patriarchal system of fundamental Christianity that seeks to control, oppress, and silence women. It's strange, It's beating a dead horse at this point to point it out, but like, she is an example of someone who is not at all living the propaganda that she speaks. So this juxtaposes her actual reality, where her voice is the center of her career, where she is, I'm assuming she's the breadwinner of her family, where she shows to be passionately convicted, opinionated, well-educated, and confident with what she speaks about, and she doesn't care about offending people at all. I might even venture to suggest that with Lilith conjunct Mars-Venus over there in the first degrees of Aquarius, for lack of a better word, she might derive some type of pleasure or satisfaction from offending people. People being offended might indicate to her that she's won the social battle. She's dominated the social situation by offending people. Offending the people. This is in Aquarius, the sign of the people. The juxtaposition of her personality and her belief system, her actions and her beliefs, this might inform that like horrifying bullshit that I know she's said before, that like, we are unworthy, rotten sinners at heart, but for the grace of God, we are redeemed. And in her chart, I can see the deep sting of that pain. I mean, her Chiron in Leo opposes her Mars, Venus, Lilith conjunction. Her place of pain is always staring right at her place of pleasure and her place of passion. There might be pain and tension whenever Allie is in the spotlight in, Leo, in the area of Leo. She might feel that there is an aggressive, oppressive force whenever she steps into her spotlight, or when she's singled out in the domain of her kingdom. She might feel like she has opposition there, and that opposition might come from the people that she was trying to connect with. I don't think people in her community appreciate when she's in the spotlight. Since Chiron is the place of the unhealed wound, but meaning it's always healing, it's all that healing is always being mended and worked on. She probably does a lot of internal work, maybe journaling about her experience with being in the spotlight and her confidence with being in the spotlight, because obviously she still does her podcast. Like, she still is sometimes the center of attention and sometimes commanding the attention of the people in her community. So she probably does a lot of inner work to help heal that, and all the time it's healing. Though another interesting aspect regarding this 4-degree Chiron Leo, Mercury is at 4 degrees exactly in conjunct this Chiron. Her Mercury is her imagined chart ruler. It's a very strong influence in her chart. No matter if she actually has a Gemini rising or not, it's conjunct her sun. It's very influential. I mean, obviously, like, she can talk, that she's made that talking her entire career. Not only does she have a podcast, but like, she wrote a book. I think that she's spoken at conferences before. I think maybe she's even like hosted her own conference. But yeah, this Pisces Mercury is in conjunct her place of endless healing, her place of endless pain. A person with this aspect might find it extremely hard or nearly impossible to communicate their pain, to mentally process their pain, because both of these planets are at 4 degrees. It's deep, it's emotional, it's private, it's secret. It is very much locked away from the public, this pain. I could see her not really being able to put her pain into words. Not only is this aspect indicative of trouble with communication in regards to her pain, but Mercury in Pisces is technically debilitated. It's a weaker Mercury anyway. It already has a disadvantage. It's already at a disadvantage when it comes to clearly communicating itself. So it's even more locked away, this pain. Also, I just realized this, but Chiron is also in the 3rd house, which is the house of communication, the house of writing. Anyway, communicating her pain, communicating that she's in pain or that something hurt her is probably feels damn near impossible for her. And speaking of this Pisces Mercury, it's also opposite her moon, which makes me think that Allie might feel sometimes that her words get misconstrued from the actual location of her feelings. Like, her impact is always different than her intent. Down there with her moon, her natal Jupiter trines Neptune and Uranus up in Capricorn, and her north node. Jupiter in Virgo, that's kind of like a Jupiter in Virgo person wouldn't probably be very comfortable accepting a spontaneous or random windfall without working for it, without like submitting for it in some way. That would feel suspicious to them. It might not feel very rewarding. It might just feel kind of like yucky, like they're gaining a debt. Jupiter is the planet of joy. It's the planet of luck. Virgo Jupiter is, I think it's debilitated because it's opposite Pisces. Yeah, Virgo Jupiter wants to work for its reward. Her joy is deeply felt when it's earned. This Jupiter in a trine to her north node, in a trine to her Neptune and Uranus, the joy that she gets from her labor feeds her spiritual work and her spiritual experience of absolving herself of debt. Capricorn North Node in the 8th house is like she is always working to pay off her spiritual debt, which is very Christian of her. She definitely is working hard on her spiritual life behind the scenes. This is a private matter. Although, full moon, Jupiter mutually receptive to her Mercury up there in the 10th house of public life, although this foundation of her private work, her private inner transformation does inform her public life, she keeps that shit private. Saturn ruling all of these placements, ruling over the 8th house, it's keeping a lid on things. Like I said earlier, I keep coming back to the lid on the pot, but like Saturn's keeping a lid on it. Moon conjunct Jupiter makes me think that maybe her mom is a big personality, or her mom made being married to her dad a big part of her identity and a big part of her personality. The 4th house is her parents, so her mom is a very influential parental figure in her life. When I look at these 4th house, 8th house connections with the context of knowing that Allie was raised Southern Baptist, Virgo 4th house signature kind of shows me that there were a lot of house rules and high expectations for Allie and her brothers, since it, is trine to Neptune, Uranus, North Node in the 8th house, that these rules and expectations really did feel like life and death. It was this is kind of indicating to me a situation of like, if Allie were to have gotten pregnant in high school or something, she was probably like, oh, no way, my parents would kill me. Like, it makes sense that the ghost of the house rules that felt like life and death, that came from her very intense religious upbringing, it makes sense that that would inform the very structure, the very architecture of Allie's being. There's ease. There's ease when it comes to sticking within the rules. She's looking to mature in the area of spiritual debt, and she's doing that by conforming to tradition. An example of Allie's Capricorn North Node, Cancer South Node that I find very striking and almost on the nose was that recently she did a podcast where she was like very strongly disagreeing with inner child work. She said something like, if you are a grown woman, you do not have a little girl inside of you. That is very much like rejecting the Cancer South Node, rejecting being the baby, rejecting nurturing while maturing and becoming more solidified, becoming more traditional. Capricorn. Just a side note, but I could only watch about like 20 minutes of her Jubilee 1v20 video because it was so tiring. She kept like, is that a gigantic bee? I feel like there's gigantic bees hitting my window. She kept moving the goalpost. She would say stuff like, in principle. I noticed that she would never fully answer her debate opponent's question ever without recontextualizing it and being like, so you're saying this, and then disagree with what she had just rewritten of what they said. She didn't give them a fucking inch, and it was very frustrating to watch. It got extremely tiring very fast. Yeah, Allie is a person who is unable to move from where she stands in her beliefs. She is not unable, but she's unwilling to learn. So I talked mostly about aspects between her different planets in her chart. Those were the things about Allie's birth chart that really drew me in. But a couple important notes to make are, like, I look to her 11th house to see her community. The ruler of her 11th house is Mars in her 9th house. So there's another kind of indicator that her community is within a 9th house context. So within a religious, institutional context. I didn't watch any podcasts where her husband was the guest, but I think I might have seen clips before or something. I don't really remember. But I think that it's interesting to note that with her natal Jupiter conjunct her moon, her husband might be more of a nurturer than her and might kind of take on a nurturing role in their house, possibly. In conclusion, Allie Beth Stuckey, Aquarius sun, Virgo moon, and possibly a Gemini rising, is someone who is very intense, has a powerful, convicted spirit, and has chosen and continues to choose to be part of an oppressive system that harms people all the time. When I was looking up Allie's chart at first, out of curiosity, I looked at the Saban symbols for her birth chart, and the symbol for her Pisces Mercury happened to be a church bazaar. With her words, Allie is someone who is selling emotional stocks in the American Christian nationalist fundamentalist church. And man, is it bizarre.